For 40 years, my father's name was carved in cold bronze on a war memorial in Millfield, Ohio. Proof the whole town said that he never came home. But the day a letter showed up at my door in a plain envelope postmarked from somewhere in Montana, I started wondering if maybe the memorial was the biggest lie any of us ever believed. For 40 years, my father's name was carved in cold bronze on a war memorial in Millfield, Ohio. Proof the whole town said that he never came home. But the day a letter showed up at my door in a plain envelope postmarked from somewhere in Montana, I started wondering if maybe the memorial was the biggest lie any of us ever believed. My name is Emily Miller. I'm 52 years old and I've lived in Millfield, Ohio my entire life, just like my mother before me and her mother before her. I teach 6th grade history at Millfield Middle School, which is a little ironic considering how long I was blind to my own family's history. I live in the same house I grew up in on Maple Ridge Road, just off Route 40. It's a quiet town, the kind of town where everybody knows whose daddy fought in which war and whose granddad worked the steel mills down in Canton. My daddy fought in Vietnam, and the whole town knew it. Yay. His name was a Sergeant Daniel J. Miller, U.S. Army. And according to every official document, every government letter and the bronze plaque outside the American Legion Hall on Main Street, he died serving his country in the fall of 1973. I was 12 years old when my mother sat me down at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and told me my father was gone. I never questioned it. Not once. Not for 40 years. My father was from Akron originally, grew up the youngest of 4 boys, the son of a steel worker and a seamstress. He joined the Army in 1966, right out of high school. My mother, Ruth, met him at a church social in Columbus the summer before his first deployment. She told me once that he walked in wearing his uniform, and she thought he was the most handsome man she'd ever laid eyes on. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at First Methodist on Broad Street. I was born in 1971. My brother, James, came along in 1972. And then in October of 1973, we got the knock on the door that no military family ever wants. A chaplain and a sergeant from the Army's notification team stood on our porch in Millfield and told my mother that Sergeant Daniel J. Miller had been killed in action during a mission near the Cambodian border. My mother accepted the folded flag. She put it on the shelf in the living room and never moved it. She didn't cry in front of us, not once. She just got quiet in a way that lasted the rest of her life. She passed away 3 years ago, and even at the end, she never talked about him much. He was a hero who never made it home, she always said. Those exact words, like she'd rehearsed them. It was a Tuesday in late October. The rain had been coming down all day. The gray, heavy kind that makes Millfield feel like the world's most forgotten corner of Ohio. I'd gotten home from school, changed out of my teaching clothes, and gone out to grab the mail. There were the usual bills. The electric bill, a Visa statement, a JCPenney catalog nobody asked for, and then there was this envelope. Plain white. No logo, no return label printed, just a rural route number handwritten in ink. So faint I had to hold it up to the porch light to read it. Glacier Falls, Montana. I didn't know a single soul in Montana. And then I looked at the name line, my name, written in handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone very old, someone whose hand shook when they held a pen. I stood on that porch in the rain for a good 30 seconds just staring at it. And when I finally opened it and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside, there was just one sentence, one line, written in the same shaky hand. If you are Daniel Miller's daughter, You deserve to know the truth about what really happened that night. That was it. No signature, no explanation, just that. I read it 3 times in the rain. Then I went inside, sat down at my kitchen table, and didn't move for an hour. It was a Tuesday in late October. The rain had been coming down all day. The gray, heavy kind that makes Millfield feel like the world's most forgotten corner of Ohio. I'd gotten home from school, changed out of my teaching clothes, and gone out to grab the mail. There were the usual bills. The electric bill, a Visa statement, a JCPenney catalog nobody asked for, and then there was this envelope. Plain white. No logo, no return label printed, just a rural route number handwritten in ink. So faint I had to hold it up to the porch light to read it. Glacier Falls, Montana. I didn't know a single soul in Montana. And then I looked at the name line, my name, written in handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone very old, someone whose hand shook when they held a pen. I stood on that porch in the rain for a good 30 seconds just staring at it, and when I finally opened it and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside, there was just one sentence, one line, written in the same shaky hand. If you are Daniel Miller's daughter, you deserve to know the truth about what really happened that night. That was it. No signature, no explanation, just that. I read it 3 times in the rain. Then I went inside, sat down at my kitchen table, and didn't move for an hour. I called my brother James that night. He lives over in Columbus now, works in insurance. When I read him the letter over the phone, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Emily, don't go digging." He sounded scared, not skeptical, scared. That told me everything I needed to know. I looked up the return address online. The street didn't come up on any residential database, but I found a small community. Glacier Falls, Montana. Population maybe 300 people. Tucked in the flatlands east of Great Falls, about 40 miles from the Highwood Mountains. There was no name, no phone number, nothing to go on. So I made a decision that probably seemed crazy to anyone rational. I took a week of personal leave from school, loaded a bag into my silver Honda Accord, plugged Glacier Falls, Montana into Google Maps, and started driving 1,800 miles. 3 days on I-90 West, through Indiana, Chicago, across Wisconsin and Minnesota and South Dakota. I stopped at a Cracker Barrel outside of Sioux Falls. I slept at a Holiday Inn Express in Billings. I drank bad coffee from gas stations in Wyoming. And the whole time, I kept that photograph and that letter in the passenger seat in a manila folder. And every time I stopped for fuel, I looked at that scratched out face and wondered who on earth had worked so hard to disappear from a 40-year-old photograph. The house at the end of that rural route was a small ranch-style place. White paint gone gray, a rusted pickup in the yard, a tire swing hanging from a cottonwood tree. An old man was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. He was maybe 78, 79, thin, white-haired, wearing a faded Army veteran baseball cap and flannel over his shoulders like a blanket. He looked at me for a long moment when I got out of my car, and then he said, very quietly, "You look just like him." His name was Earl Davenport, former Army Staff Sergeant, served with my father in the 5th Special Forces Group, Bien Hoa Province, Vietnam. He'd been waiting, he said, for the right time to reach out. He'd written the letter 3 weeks after my mother died. He'd read her obituary online and figured he was running out of time. He told me that the official story of my father's death, killed in action near the Cambodian border on October 14th, 1973, was fabricated. Not by accident, not by bureaucratic error. Deliberately. He said that my father had not died in battle. He had disappeared after a classified mission went catastrophically wrong. A mission so politically sensitive that the Army, under pressure from someone above his commanding officer, had manufactured a death record rather than acknowledge what had actually happened. He said 3 men had gone on that mission. 1 came back officially dead. 1 came back with his identity buried in classified files. And 1, Earl, had lived quietly in Montana for 40 years, too afraid to say a word. Before I could ask him anything else, before I could even fully breathe, he reached into his breast pocket and placed a sealed envelope on the table between us. "Your father wrote this in 1979, he said. He gave it to me himself. He told me if the truth ever came out, I was to give this to his family. He said it would explain everything. And he said to warn you, what's inside could change everything you think you know about who he was."
I sat at Earl Davenport's kitchen table in Glacier Falls, Montana, and I opened my father's letter. He had written it in the spring of 1979, 6 years after he was declared dead. 6 years. He was alive. He'd been alive. The letter was 8 pages long, written in my father's handwriting I recognized from birthday cards my mother had kept in a shoebox under her bed. He explained everything. The mission in 1973 had involved the extraction of a high-value defector, someone with connections to North Vietnamese intelligence. My father's unit had been ordered to bring the man out quietly, with 0 documentation. When the mission was compromised and their cover was blown, 2 of the men were captured. My father was one of them. He was held for 14 months in a facility that the U.S. government refused to officially acknowledge. When he was finally released through back-channel negotiations in late 1974, he was given a choice by a military intelligence officer he'd never met before: return to his life, but expose the mission and potentially destabilize an ongoing diplomatic operation, or accept a new identity, permanent relocation, and a guaranteed monthly payment, and let his family believe he was dead. He wrote that he chose wrong. He wrote it over and over in that letter. I chose wrong. I was 28 years old and I was scared, and I chose wrong. He said he watched us from a distance, that he'd driven past our house on Maple Ridge Road in the summer of 1977 and seen me and James playing in the front yard, and he had sat in his car and wept. He said he'd spent the next 30 years trying to figure out how to undo a decision that couldn't be undone. He never could. He died in 1997 in a small town in eastern Oregon, under a name I'd never heard. Earl Davenport had been with him at the end. He was 60 years old. I sat there in that kitchen and I cried until I couldn't breathe. Not because he left. I understood in the way you can only understand something when you've read someone's own handwriting and felt the weight of the paper in your hands. I understood that he had been trapped. I cried because he'd been alone, because for 24 years he'd carried that choice by himself, because he never got to know that I became a history teacher, that James had 3 kids, that my mother, Ruth Miller, had kept a folded flag on her shelf for 30 years and told anyone who asked that her husband was a hero. She never stopped loving him. I could tell, the way she said those words every time. He was a hero who never made it home. She said it like a prayer, like she was protecting something she couldn't explain. I drove back to Millfield with my father's letter on the passenger seat. I called James from the road somewhere in South Dakota, and I read him the whole thing out loud, both of us crying somewhere around the Wisconsin state line. When I got home, I filed a request with the Department of Defense under the Freedom of Information Act. It took 14 months. What I got back was heavily redacted. So many black bars, it looked like an art project. But the pages that weren't blacked out confirmed enough. My father's official death record had been generated by an administrative office that no longer exists. The mission he described was referenced under a code name that I've since learned was associated with a classified intelligence program that operated outside conventional military oversight between 1971 and 1975. I'm not naive enough to think the full truth will ever be declassified in my lifetime. But I have his letter, 8 pages of his handwriting. I have his voice, the voice of a man who made a terrible decision in a terrible moment and spent the rest of his life grieving the family he left behind. I had his name removed from the memorial in Millfield. The American Legion Post wasn't happy about it, but I wasn't going to leave a lie carved in bronze on Main Street. My father's name is on a small granite marker now, in Millfield's town cemetery, next to my mother's grave. It reads, Daniel J. Miller, Sergeant, U.S. Army, beloved father. The stone doesn't say he died in battle. It doesn't say what year. It just says he was loved. I go there on Sunday morning sometimes, with coffee from Brewster's Diner on 3rd Street, and I sit between both their graves for a while. And I think about what it costs a person to carry a secret. And I think about the fact that my mother, Ruth Miller, kept that flag on the shelf for 30 years and told everyone her husband was a hero. And she wasn't wrong. She just didn't know the whole story. None of us did. And maybe that's the hardest part of all. If this story stopped you in your tracks, if it made you feel something, please hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Share it with someone who believes that the truth always finds its way home. We post new stories every week, and every single one is worth your time. You just heard about a daughter who drove 1,800 miles to find the truth about her father.